9 out of 10 dentists recommend it. A man in a white coat holds up the product and nods, and you believe him, even though you have no idea who he is, whether he is a real dentist or whether he was paid to stand there this morning. Clinically proven. Doctors trust it. Recommended by experts. A confident voice, a title, a lab coat, a stethoscope, and something in you quietly relaxes and stops asking questions. Someone who knows more than me has already decided this is good. I can stop thinking now. So you reach for your wallet, not because you checked the thing, but because someone who looked like an authority told you to. And I want to be very careful here, because I am about to say something that includes me. What just happened to you is not stupidity. Deferring to experts is one of the smartest shortcuts your brain ever developed. You cannot personally verify everything, so you trust the pilot, the surgeon, the engineer, and most of the time that trust is well placed and it keeps you alive. But that same shortcut can be borrowed, costumed, and faked, and today, as a doctor, I am going to show you exactly what an authority figure does inside your brain, why a costume can be more persuasive than a fact, and then I am going to tell you the most important thing on this entire channel, how to be skeptical of authority, including mine. Welcome back. Let's talk about the white coat. We have taken apart the store, the price, the decoy, the clock, and the crowd. Authority is the next great lever, and Robert Cialdini named it as one of his core principles of influence. The rule: we obey, or at least defer to, legitimate authority, and we do it quickly, often automatically. And crucially, we respond not to real authority, but to the symbols of it. A title, a uniform, a confident tone, the trappings, not the substance. And symbols, unlike substance, can be manufactured by anyone with a costume budget. Let me show you just how deep this runs, with the most disturbing experiment in the history of psychology. In the 1960s, a researcher named Stanley Milgram brought ordinary people into a lab and told them to give what they believed were real, increasingly painful electric shocks to another person every time that person answered a question wrong. The victim, an actor, screamed, begged, and eventually went silent. And whenever the ordinary person hesitated, a man in a gray lab coat simply said, calmly, "The experiment requires that you continue." No threats, no weapons, just an authority figure in a lab coat. And a staggering majority of completely normal, decent people kept going, all the way to what they believed were dangerous, potentially lethal shocks, because a man who looked like an authority told them to. Milgram did not discover that people are evil. He discovered something scarier, that in the presence of what looks like legitimate authority, ordinary people will switch off their own conscience and outsource the decision. Milgram even had a name for the state those people entered, the agentic state, a psychological shift in which you stop seeing yourself as the author of your own actions and start seeing yourself as merely the instrument of the authority. I am just following the expert. It is not really my decision. That quiet handover of responsibility is exactly what a marketer wants when they place a professional in front of you. Not only your trust, but your sense that the choice is no longer fully yours to question. And here is the detail I never forget. It was the lab coat. In later variations, when the authority figure was dressed in ordinary clothes, or gave orders from another room, or seemed less official, obedience collapsed. The power was not in the man. It was in the costume of authority he wore. Sit with that. The uniform did the work. And that is not a one-off. A researcher named Leonard Bickman ran a beautifully simple set of studies on the street. He had a person stop strangers and give them slightly odd orders. Pick up this bag. Give that man a coin for the parking meter. When the person giving the order was dressed in ordinary street clothes, most people ignored them. But when the exact same person giving the exact same order wore a security guard's uniform, obedience shot up dramatically. Same human, same words. Add a uniform, and strangers obey. That is the entire business model of the man in the lab coat in the commercial. He does not need to be a doctor. He needs to look like one for 30 seconds. And the costume extends far beyond the coat, to the entire stage. The wall of framed diplomas. The thick, serious book on the desk. The deep, calm, unhurried voice. The expensive office and the important-sounding company name. We read all of it, instantly and unconsciously, as proof of competence, when it is really just set design. Anyone can buy a nice office and print a certificate. And if you think this is harmless, let me show you the darkest chapter of this trick, and one that hits close to home for me. For decades in the 20th century, cigarette companies put doctors, real ones and actors both, at the center of their advertising. One infamous campaign proudly announced that more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Physicians in white coats, calmly recommending the very product that was quietly killing their patients. It worked brilliantly for years, precisely because the authority of the medical code switched off the public's judgment about an obvious danger. The costume did not just move a product. It helped delay a life-saving truth for a generation. Never forget, the white coat has been aimed at people before for things far worse than an overpriced supplement. And this is not only about strangers in advertisements. It happens inside the professions themselves. In 1966, a psychiatrist named Charles Hofling ran a chilling study in a real hospital. A researcher phoned nurses on duty, claimed to be a doctor they had never met, and ordered them to give a patient a dose of a drug that was obviously far too high, well beyond the labeled maximum, on nothing but his word over the phone. Hospital rules forbade taking drug orders by phone and forbade that dose. And yet almost all of the nurses, 21 out of 22, began to comply before they were stopped. Not because they were careless, these were trained professionals, but because a voice claiming the authority of doctor was enough to override the written rules and their own knowledge. If authority can do that to experts inside a hospital, imagine gently what a lab coat on a screen does to the rest of us. So now let me open the hood, because this is where being a doctor genuinely changes how you will see every expert endorsement for the rest of your life. What actually happens in your brain when an authority speaks? You might assume you listen to their advice and then weigh it, adding it to your own judgment. But the brain scan suggests something far more unsettling. In a striking study by Jan Engelman and colleagues, people made financial decisions inside an fMRI scanner, sometimes on their own, and sometimes while receiving advice from an expert. And when the expert's advice was present, the parts of the brain that normally compute value, that do the actual work of weighing, is this a good choice for me, went quieter. It was as if the brain, hearing an expert, simply offloaded the decision and stopped doing the math itself. Researchers have called this offloading to authority. You do not weigh the expert's opinion against yours. You put yours down and pick up theirs. It is worth pausing on how strange that is. Your brain does not treat the expert as one more input to weigh. It treats the expert as a replacement for the effort of thinking at all. Evolution built that shortcut because, over a lifetime, deferring to the person who genuinely knows more is usually the winning move. But the shortcut is blind. It cannot tell a real expert from a convincing costume. It responds to the signal of authority and hands the wheel to whoever is wearing it. Think about how efficient and how dangerous that is. Your own critical faculty does not argue with the expert. It goes to sleep in the expert's presence, which means that a fake authority does not have to defeat your judgment in a fair fight. It just has to switch your judgment off by showing up in the right costume. The lab coat is not decoration. It is an off switch for the part of your brain that would otherwise protect you. There is one more piece, and it makes everything stickier. The halo effect, first described a century ago by the psychologist Edward Thorndike. When someone has one impressive quality, we unconsciously assume they are impressive across the board. A person who is confident, attractive, well-dressed, or credentialed in one area gets an undeserved halo of competence in every area. So the cardiologist who is genuinely brilliant at hearts gets automatic, unearned trust when he sells you a vitamin, a mattress, or a financial product, none of which he knows the first real thing about. The halo leaks from the one thing they know onto all the things they do not. And there is a final accelerant, confidence itself. Studies of how we decide whom to trust show that we lean heavily on how confident a person sounds, almost regardless of whether they turn out to be right. A steady, fluent, unhesitating delivery reads to the brain as competence, which means the person who says, "I am certain this is the best," will routinely outpersuade the more knowledgeable person who honestly says, "Well, it depends." We mistake the sound of certainty for the substance of truth. And certainty, unlike truth, is remarkably easy to fake. So let me show you the specific ways this gets weaponized, the catalog of borrowed authority, because naming each one is how you get your off switch back under your own control. First, the costume itself, the white coat, the scrubs, the stethoscope, the hard hat, the suit. Actors wear these in advertisements constantly. The famous line was literally built on it, an actor saying, "I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV," and then giving medical advice anyway. The visual of expertise, with none of the expertise behind it. Second, titles and credentials, real but irrelevant. This one is subtle because the person may genuinely be an expert, just not in what they are selling. Dr. So-and-so endorsing a supplement, when their doctorate is in a completely unrelated field. A Nobel laureate in physics opining on nutrition. The credential is real. Its relevance to the claim in front of you is zero. They are renting you the halo. Third, jargon and complexity. When something is explained in dense, technical, sciencey sounding language you cannot quite follow, your brain often reads that difficulty as depth and depth as authority. Utilizing a proprietary triphase molecular matrix. It may mean nothing at all, but the fog itself feels like expertise, and confusion makes you defer. Real experts can usually explain things simply. Manufactured authority hides inside complexity on purpose. There is a famous demonstration of this, called the Dr. Fox effect. Researchers hired a professional actor, gave him an impressive invented title, Dr. Myron Fox, and had him deliver a lecture to a room of educated professionals, a lecture written on purpose to be full of made-up terms, double talk, and meaningless contradictions. He delivered the nonsense with warmth and total confidence, and the audience of experts rated him highly. Clear, knowledgeable, stimulating. They had just been taught nothing by no one, and they enjoyed it because he sounded like an authority. Fourth, the vague appeal to science. Clinically proven. Studies show. Scientifically formulated. Backed by research. Proven by whom? Which study? Funded by whom? Showing what exactly? These phrases borrow the enormous authority of science, while carefully saying nothing you could ever check. The word science is doing the persuading, with no actual science required to be present. Fifth, seals, badges, and certifications. Little logos and awards that look official and may be entirely self-created, paid for, or meaningless. Number 1. Recommended. Recommended by whom? Chosen how? An impressive-looking gold seal triggers the authority reflex whether or not anything real stands behind it. And 6th, borrowed fame. The celebrity, the influencer, treated as an authority on things they know nothing about, because the crowd we talked about last time plus the halo of fame together feel like a credential. Being famous for one thing gets silently converted into being trustworthy about everything. And a 7th, borrowed institutional authority, as used by NASA. Recommended by a leading university. The number 1 hospital chose this. The glow of a respected institution gets draped over a product the institution may have nothing real to do with. An 8th, the authority of numbers. A confident statistic, 73% of users saw results, or a serious-looking chart, triggers the very same reflex, because data feels objective and expert. But a number with no source, no sample size, and no context is just a costume made of digits. If they will not tell you where the number came from, treat it exactly like an actor in a lab coat. You see all of these fused together in the modern wellness and money influencer. The confident tone, the clinical-sounding jargon, the studies show, the impressive charts, the real credential stretched far outside its lane, the crowd of followers standing in as proof, all bundled into one charismatic person looking straight into the camera and telling you precisely what to buy. It is the man in the lab coat from the old commercial, rebuilt for your phone, and it is more persuasive than ever, because now the authority also feels like a friend. Now, before I give you the defense, I owe you the most honest moment on this channel, and I mean this completely. I am sitting here in the authority of a doctor. This whole channel is built, in part, on that. And everything I have just told you applies to me too. So here is what a real expert should always want. I do not want you to believe me because I am a doctor. I want you to believe things because the evidence and the reasoning hold up when you check them, which is exactly why, in every episode, I try to name the real researcher, the real study, the real mechanism, so you can go and verify it without me. A manipulator wants your obedience. A genuine expert wants your understanding and is glad when you check their work. So please, be skeptical of the white coat, including this one. If anything I say does not hold up when you look into it, trust the evidence, not me. That is not me being modest. That is the entire defense, stated out loud. So here is your defense, and it has 2 simple moves. The first, separate the messenger from the message. When you feel that pull to trust because of who is saying it, mentally strip away the costume, the title, the confidence, and ask, if a random stranger with no credentials said this exact claim, would it still sound true? Would I still buy it? If the claim can only stand up while wearing a lab coat, it cannot stand up. Make the message defend itself, naked, without the uniform. The second move, when the authority might be real, check the lane. Ask 2 questions. 1. Is this authority actually real and verifiable, not just an actor or a vague experts? And 2, and this is the one almost everyone forgets, is their expertise actually relevant to this specific claim? A brilliant heart surgeon selling a diet pill is, on the subject of that diet pill, just a confident stranger in a nice coat. Real credential, wrong lane. The halo does not transfer. Make it prove that its expertise actually covers the thing it is selling you. And there is a third question, maybe the most revealing of all. Follow the money. Ask who is paying this expert to say this. A doctor recommending a treatment they have no stake in is one thing. A doctor quietly paid by the company that makes it is quite another, and the honest ones disclose exactly that up front. When an authority has something to gain from your yes, the coat is no longer just a coat. It is a sales uniform. The financial interest does not automatically make them wrong, but it does mean their authority can no longer do your thinking for you. You have to go back and check the claim itself. And if you want the deepest version, remember what the brain scan showed. Authority makes your own judgment go quiet. So the discipline is simply to keep your judgment awake in the presence of the expert. Not to reject experts. That is foolish. Real expertise is precious. But to stay in the room mentally, to keep weighing, to keep asking why. Instead of handing over the wheel the moment you see a title. Trust, but keep computing. And here is the quiet truth underneath all of it. Real authority has nothing to fear from your questions. The genuine expert is glad to explain the why, to show you the study, to tell you honestly when something is outside their field, to disclose who pays them. It is only the borrowed, the faked, and the conflicted authority that needs you to stop asking and simply obey. So your skepticism is not disrespect. It is the single best test there is for telling a real expert from a costume. Point it at everyone, evenly, and the fakes fall away while the real ones stand comfortably in the light. So the next time a confident voice in a white coat tells you that this is the one the professionals choose, I want you to smile and gently pull your own judgment back awake. Ask who they really are, whether this is even their field, and whether the claim would survive without the costume. Real experts will pass that test easily and will respect you for asking. Only the manufactured ones need you to stop thinking. You get to keep thinking. That is the whole game. Before you go, tell me one thing in the comments, because I read them and they honestly make my day. What is the last thing you bought because an expert, a doctor, a professional, an authority figure of any kind recommended it, and you never really checked whether they knew what they were talking about? One word, drop it below, and then scroll and read a few others, and notice how many of us handed over the wheel to a costume. And here is where we go next. We have covered the crowd and the expert. But there is a trick even older and even harder to resist. One that works by giving you something first. A free sample, a free gift, a small unexpected kindness that quietly places you in debt and makes saying no feel almost physically uncomfortable. Next episode, I am going to show you the strange, powerful rule of reciprocity and why free is one of the most expensive words in marketing. Subscribe so it does not slip past you. And until then, when you see the white coat, keep your own judgment awake. Stay skeptical. Stay awake.